Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Ite Namani.
I remember Prabhupada gave a lecture one day in the evening, an evening class, and he mentioned a godbrother of his, he'd received a letter that a godbrother of his had just passed away. Don't remember, somebody else will know the name. It was one of the Tirtha Swamis in the Gaudiya Math, but it wasn't Bhakti Vilas Tirtha, who lived, of course, much beyond that. It was another one whose name was something Tirtha Maharaj. And Prabhupada said that this particular godbrother was very kind upon him, and had actually written him a letter while he was living in Vrindavan as a Vanaprastha, or Jhansi or Vrindavan. I forget where he said he was, but he said he received a letter from this godbrother reminding him that Guru Maharaj, meaning Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, had wanted him to take sannyas and to preach, especially in the West. And this godbrother had written him a letter reminding him about that. And Prabhupada said, I did not want to take sannyas because it is a very difficult position materially. It's not easy to do, and I didn't want to do it. But this godbrother wrote me this letter at this time, and he said, and at the same time, right in the same days when I received this letter, he said, 3 times in succession, on 3 successive nights, he said, my Guru Maharaj appeared before me in dream. And each time in the dream, he was walking away from me. And as he was walking away, he turned around and beckoned for me to follow. And he went like this. Right? And he had that dream 3 times. I believe he said 3 nights in succession, but definitely 3 successive times in a very short span of time. Right at the same time that externally the godbrother had sent them this letter. And these things prompted him to take sannyas. What Prabhupada said specifically was, in this way, my Guru Maharaj pulled me out from this material world. And when he said pulled, 2 tears just literally suddenly formed and leaped out of his eyes and went then, and it was just like they were squeezed out by a shudder of ecstasy, and went running down his cheeks. They hadn't formed slowly and dripped down like most tears do. As he said pulled, his voice got real thick as he said it, and tears came shooting out of his eyes. And everybody in the room was just speechless, right? Because we were all devotees or guests but mostly it was just devotees there. It was an evening program and during a weekday. And I was very much impressed at the amount of intense feeling that he had toward his Guru Maharaj calling him to take sannyas.
I always had an attraction to Vrindavan. And as early as 1967, I wanted to go to Vrindavan. So I remember one morning, we were on a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada. I believe that was around Stowe Lake. And I was walking right next to Srila Prabhupada. And he stopped. He put out his cane, he was leaning on his cane. And he said, so, we have received a letter from Achyutananda, and he wants some men to join his party in Lucknow. So I immediately popped up, said, I'd like to go, Srila Prabhupada. May we go? May Gurdas and I go? He said, yes, maybe we can arrange that. We will start an American house in Lucknow. Then we walked a little farther. Then he said, no, you should not go now. And he turned around and he said, someday I will take you to India on foot. I will show you India on foot. So from that moment I was waiting for that day that would come. And that came about 3 years later, 1970, October 4th. Our party of American and European devotees landed in Bombay, and our party had just a few days earlier arrived in Calcutta via Tokyo, some swamis. And in that fall between October 4th and Srila Prabhupada leaving India in the spring of 71, In so many places, he showed us India on foot, literally walking on foot through the streets.
And then Srila Prabhupada every day would take us on parikrama to many of the holy places. He took us to Govardhan and Badarsana and Nandagaon. He took us to the various places in Vrindavan, Radha Damodar Temple, Radha Govindaji Temple. And I remember especially one day he took us to Mahavan, Gokul, and he took us to Brahmandagat. And Brahmandagat is the place where Krishna was accused of eating dirt. And then he opened his mouth and Mother Yashoda saw the universe. I remember Srila Prabhupada so animately telling that story right at the place. He was telling the stories wherever he would take us. And then he told us to take bath in the Jamuna. So all the devotees were inviting Prabhupada to also take bath in Jamuna. But Srila Prabhupada said, today I am very sick and I cannot take baths, but you all go and enjoy a nice bath in Jamuna. So all the devotees were in Jamuna and he was on the steps, quite high over the river. And he was just watching all the devotees enjoying the wonderful ambrosial waters of Jamuna. And he was just smiling, looking at us. And he became so ecstatic just to see all the devotees bathing that he very quickly got up and took off his clothes and put on gamsha and came down to take bath with us in Jamuna. And devotees were very ecstatic, very happy. Everyone was gathered around him. And devotees were even bathing him like an abhishek with Jamuna water. And Srila Prabhupada was just very happy to be bathing in the Jamuna along with his disciples in the holy land of Vrindavan.
Bhagaji was telling all these beautiful stories and telling about bedding with Srila Prabhupada. And he was telling us about how Vrindavan was so special. And he said the fish in the Jamuna River, they'll be swimming along, and as soon as they feel like they're getting close to the Ganga, they turn around and swim back towards the Jamuna. And he said, if you take, and Srila Prabhupada's right there listening to everything, and so we knew if Srila Prabhupada said, no, that's not true, or he didn't say anything, it was like, oh, these are real pastimes. And the interchange between them, to see the friendly interchange, was just really lovely, because we had only seen Srila Prabhupada in settings with his disciples, where he was like a lion on the Vyasasan preaching to his disciples, but now he was in this completely different mood, relaxed with a friend. It was really sweet. And Bhagaji told us that each grain of sand, if you look under an atomic microscope, it would say, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And he said if you looked at the bones of the Vaishnavas, if you actually analyzed them, every microbe, every atom, every cell in there would say, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. That the entire atmosphere of Raj was surcharged with the holy name of the Lord.
This was in Vrindavan. The Gurukul building was under construction. I probably would like to go over there every couple of days to see how it was progressing. So they went to the back of the building where all the workers were out there in the early morning, and he had a whole contingent of sannyasis and senior devotees with him. And they were looking out the back windows there at the workers, and they were out there, some of them were bathing under there was a pipe with water gushing out, and they were bathing, and some of them were on fires, were making chapatis, some of them were brushing their teeth with neem twigs, they were chanting, they were Brijbasis, a lot of them, so they were chanting songs about Krishna. And Prabhupada was just watching this whole scene and appreciating it. And finally he turned around and he said, just see. He said, they will rise early in the morning, they will work all day long, for what? He said, somebody said 3 rupees. For a few rupees, he said, they will work all day long in the hot sun, they will take bath, they will chant some mantra, he said, they will live in this simple way. He said, and then he was just kind of really appreciating how the simplicity of their life and how sincere and innocent they were. And then Hansaduta Maharaj said, Prabhupada, we should learn to live like this. And Prabhupada just began to laugh, and he said, "You will never learn. You will never learn."
One very difficult time was in 1974. It's when Prabhupada was going for the opening of the Krishna Balaram Mandir. It was supposed to be on Janmashtami. So he arrived there, and of course the temple was nowhere near an opening, which got established very quickly. And Prabhupada remained there, and he got very ill. If you remember at that time, it's the first time we were actually chanting 24 hours a day in the temple room. It went on for weeks. And I would literally, I would put my arms, my arms under Prabhupada's shoulder blades to walk him into the bathroom, back out of the bathroom, sitting in the bed like that, day after day after day. And he's eating a little orange. One day, weeks into it, he said to me, I think I'm feeling some appetite. He said, make some upma. Now, Jamuna's there. And I said to him, Jamuna's here, I'll have her. No, he said, I like your upma. He said, you make it, which shocked me, and pleased me to unimaginable. So I go in and I say the exact same thing. I said, Prabhupada wants upma, Jamuna. Wonderful, she said, I'll get right on it. And I said, Jamuna, he asked me to make it. And she's such a wonderful devotee. Immediately, who could cook like Jamuna? Immediately she said, what do you need me to do? This was Jamuna, No, there was like no ego at all. Like, well, he wants you, No, he said, well, how can I help? She said, this is what she was the one doing everything. Anyway, it was all we had were dehydrated peas. And I made it. I brought it into Prabhupada, on his plate, just a bowl. And I left the room. So we're all outside Prabhupada's door. This is what we just sit there and listen what you can hear. I think I was eating. Anyway, I hear a little ding, 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 ding. I go back in, I offer obeisances, I sit up and I see this bowl. It doesn't look like he ate anything. Like a child, it looked a little moved around, maybe had a bite. Literally, it looked like, what a child would do. And as soon as I look up, he already knows what I'm thinking. Now, he's not even eating. And he looked at me. I want you to know, he said, it was very, very good. He said, but I have no appetite. He said, I thought if I had you make it something I really liked, my appetite. He said, but I don't have appetite. He said, but it was very good. So his only concern was he saw that I was upset that he didn't eat. Nothing about how he's feeling. And it was always like that. He'd be lying there and, did you take prasadam? Did you get your shower? Did you do like this? So then that evening, it's hot. This is September, August in Vrindavan. So he would sleep on his, in the garden, Krishna Balaram Mandir, which there wasn't a garden, nothing was finished, but his rooms were 90% done. But he would sleep outside for the coolness. So he had a typical Indian bed with this mosquito net over it. And the mosquito net went down, they had made the surface with bricks, just laid them down. So I would massage him under the mosquito net, and then I would go under his bed and sleep there because the mosquito net protected me from the mosquitoes as well. So one night about 1 o'clock in the morning, I hear noise. And I'm lying on the ground, and I'm just looking at Prabhupada lying on the ground. So of course I roll out and I pick him up and I sit him on the bed. And Prabhupada, what happened? He said, he said I had to pass, and I thought I had enough strength. He said, I didn't want to disturb you. He said, but I have no strength. And I'm Prabhupada. I said, I'm lying under your bed. I was chastising him. I said, I'm just lying under here waiting to do something. But he was always like that. If you were sleepy, he didn't even want to wake you up. This is his way. So then I got malaria. So now I'm literally deathly ill. Everyone's taking care of themselves. One day he walks through the door. I'm lying in the servants' quarters. They're eating prasadam. 3-4 devotees are eating prasadam. I'm lying on the floor. In very bad shape. Prabhupada's walking through to go to his bathroom, and he said, is anyone taking care of Shruta Kirti? And I'm like, yeah, finally. He said, get him a bed to lie in. Call the doctor. Bring him some Nimbu Pani. And unless he had said it, I don't know what would have happened over the next 48 hours. But he said, take care of him. And so that happened, and I got better. but I was always ill. So finally I said, Brahmananda, I said, I want to leave. You know, I said, I got to leave. I want to go back to the West. So, he said, I'll talk to Prabhupada. What I didn't know was when he went to do it, I'm in the room. I was very, I was always afraid to face Prabhupada with my issues. I had no problem taking care of him, but when it came to something, couldn't do it. So I'm thinking he's arranging everything. I go in the room, and when I go in, he says, Prabhupada, Shrutakirti wants to go back to the US for his health. And I'm like, oh man. So now I'm sitting, and Prabhupada looks at me. I'm right in front of me. He says, so, he said, you need to go for your health? I said, well, Prabhupada, I said, yes, I think so. I said, I've been so sick. I said, is it all right? He looked at me. He said, all right. He said, you saved my life. He said, of course. He said, go back. He said, get your health. He says, we're going to be coming very soon. He said, then I'll meet you back in Los Angeles and you resume your activities. He said, but absolutely. I mean, I was feeling so distressed. And he just made you feel everything's all right. Whether it was or not wasn't the issue. It was, he didn't want you to feel bad. He just wanted to encourage you. So then, that afternoon goes by. Every night I'm taking Prabhupada out. He's sitting in a rocking chair under the tamal tree, listening to his disciples give class. And I'm sitting on the marble floor next to him. So we're at Krishna Balaram Mandir, under a tamal tree, sitting next to Prabhupada on the floor in the temple. And I'm thinking, what a fool am I, like, Prabhupada, it's beautiful. So I said, Prabhupada, I'm not going to go. I said, I'll manage. And he looked at me. He said, that's very nice, he said. And he said, and because, he said, of your sincerity, he said, Krishna will take care of everything. And the next day, Bali Mridang comes from New York, unbeknownst to me at all. And he comes into the servants' quarters with a suitcase, suitcase, regular old, and he opens it up and he's like, this is for you. And it's filled with nuts, dried fruits, oats, like everything I dream about while I'm in India. And I'm there, I said, oh, thank you. I said, for Prabhupada. He said, no. He said, I brought it for you. And I'm like, huh? He said, no, I just thought, you. So, I mean, Prabhupada, that's Prabhupada. And Krishna. And Prabhupada said, yeah, Krishna. And he knew, he knew everything. But, just seeing his satisfaction when you could say something like that, it was very nice, he said. But he wasn't going to tell me, which he always dealt with me like that. Never told me what to do. He always said things in such a way, I have to make choices. Yeah.
What was supposed to be the grand opening of the Krishna Balaram Mandir in August of 1974. And I decided it was my turn to go to India. People had been going, the first wave of devotees went some years back, and people had gone to the Mayapur for Gaur Purnima the year before that. I had not yet made my initial trip to India, so I decided, all right, I'll go for this grand opening. And so the way I bought my ticket was LA, New York, then New York to India. But I decided I'll spend some days in New York. So while I was in New York, waiting to board my next flight, I found out that Srila Prabhupada had arrived in Vrindavan, and he looked around and decided that the Krishna Balaram Mandir was not ready for a grand opening. The guest house wasn't finished. There was so much more construction that needed to be done. He called the festival off. But I was already in New York. I used the first part of my ticket. I figured, well, why not? Let me just go anyway. So off I went, and I arrived there in Vrindavan. It was a couple of days before Janmashtami. And it was nice because there weren't many people there. There was no festival. Otherwise, there would have been hundreds and hundreds of devotees there. So it translated into me having some more personal association with Srila Prabhupada. So, especially the fact that the first afternoon I was there, I happened to be standing outside of Srila Prabhupada's room as he came downstairs to give darshan. Every day he would have some darshan with the local people in Vrindavan. Palika came out of the kitchen or the pujari room with the garland and said, here, Swarup, give this to Srila Prabhupada. And already there were some elderly gentlemen sitting in the room, and Srila Prabhupada was sitting behind his desk, and they were talking. So I walked in, I put the garland on Srila Prabhupada, I bowed down, gave my obeisances, and as I was walking out, Srila Prabhupada said, "No, you can stay, sit down." And so I sat against the back wall, and I just watched. I watched and observed how Srila Prabhupada was interacting with these gentlemen. I had no idea who was who. Maybe some were his godbrothers. They were just people he knew from Vrindavan when he was living there. They all seemed, they were Brijbasis, very, pious, wonderful, old elderly gentlemen. And most of the talking was in Hindi or Bengali. Actually, it was Bengali mostly, except now and then I'd hear a verse in Sanskrit that I'd recognize. And I noticed how Srila Prabhupada would go in and out. He'd be just joking with them, talking very casually, and then he would get serious and quote, a verse that I recognize from Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita. And I realized that although all of us, his disciples, we had so much awe and reverence for Srila Prabhupada, I mean, just the fact that he was so much older than us. We always refer to Prabhupada as our spiritual father, but in reality, he was more the age of our grandparents. As a matter of fact, coincidentally, Srila Prabhupada was born the same exact day as my maternal grandpa, Abe, September 1st, 1896. But what I was noticing in the room is that these were gentlemen of his age and his generation, but they gave so much respect for Srila Prabhupada. There was a friendly exchanges. I could tell they were like reminiscing, just joking and talking, casual talk. But they were giving so much respect to Srila Prabhupada and recognizing his stature, his status. And it was nice to see. I realized that Srila Prabhupada's reputation, who he was, did not go unnoticed among the Brijbasis, among his godbrothers, because even by then, by 1974, his accomplishments were phenomenal. It was 9 years into ISKCON, not even 8, from 66 to 74, and what he had accomplished in just those 8 years was unbelievable. He was conquering the world. He was like a transcendental Alexander the Great. And so when he went back to India with his dancing white elephants, it was he was given this due respect, even by his old friends in Vrindavan. And it was nice to witness those exchanges in that room.
One time we carried Prabhupada, they were building the Gurukul in Vrindavan in 77, the last year there. And so we carried him in the rocking chair up to take a tour of it. And as we were going through the different areas, the devotee would say, "This is my room, Prabhupada." Another one, "This is my room, Prabhupada," and this is for this. Prabhupada got mad and he said, "You're all so concerned about yourselves, your own rooms. I built this school for the kids. Fill it up with students. This is for the students." And he got upset about that. Then as we were carrying him back to his room, when we went by, we were carrying him in the chair, they were chanting in the temple room. They knew Prabhupada was going by. So they were, "Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada." Prabhupada said, "What are they chanting?" And we said, "They're chanting Jai Prabhupada." And he said, "I do not like this. Tell them to chant Hare Krishna." So, I mean, it's okay a few times, but he didn't want it to go on and on and on and on.
Another time when he was circumambulating the temple, he came to originally they had used some kind of red stone that went around the parikram path, around the Krishna Balaram Mandir. And it was laid out in a particular pattern, but when it came to this one particular area where there was a curve, it was kind of a strange looking arrangement of stone. And Prabhupada pointed to it with his cane and said, "What is this?" He said, "This is not a proper pattern." He said, "They have cheated you. They've given you the rejected stone. And they have charged you according to the rate for the good stone. You've been cheated." Then Harikesh, well, this is the rasa that Harikesh had with Prabhupada. He would either try to correct or argue with Prabhupada. And everybody was always like kind of wondering, what's he going to say now? So he began to give an argument to Prabhupada. "No, Prabhupada, actually it is a pattern." And he launched into a complex explanation of how it was actually a pattern. And so Prabhupada said, "It's not a pattern. It's obvious it's not a pattern." And they were going back and forth. Finally, Prabhupada yelled at him. He said, "Yes," he said, "it is a pattern. It is a clown's pattern." And said, "And you are the fool." And then Harikesh began to laugh hysterically. And everybody was just kind of in awe that this person would have the nerve to argue with Prabhupada about something like this, but that seemed to be the nature of their relationship. But I just remember, yes, it is a pattern. It is a clown's pattern.
What happened was, again, this was my cooking pastimes with Srila Prabhupada. So, everybody else would be going through bead bags. I'd have this metal trunk full of, the kerosene stove, pots, pans, rolling pins, and, rice, dal, chapati, and flowers. So we're going on Vrindavan Parikrama, but we went in a bus. So I had my trunk with us. And the devotees' prasadam was being provided somehow or other. At this one place we stopped, and it was near Govardhan Hill. And there was this veranda, right off here was the street, and here was the veranda, covered over, and here was all these doors, like it was a dharamshala. But the thing that was really struck me funny was when you'd open the doors, there would be these rooms, like a dharamshala, it's just a room. You've been to India, so it's just a room. But there was no back wall. Just open it up, and here was these rooms, and that was right out there was the rest of the world. Anyway, into one of these rooms, Prabhupada went to have his massage, and the rest of us were sitting out there, and I was cooking out on this veranda. And the thing about cooking for Prabhupada, as soon as he had his massage and he came in, he had to come and have the plate ready. Like, he didn't wait around or say, oh, excuse me, Srila Prabhupada, but blah, blah, blah. It's like, there it was. So there I was out in the sidewalk, and I really had to have it together. And I only had so much fuel and so much chapati dough, and, it was a tight little schedule. You're used to schedules, so you know. Anyways, he comes out. I had it ready. We all sit down. There was the brahmacharis and the sannyasis on one side, the grihasthas and their wives on the other. Just as we start to eat, woof, 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 woof. 2 dogs come, yap, yap, yap. And up went the sannyasis and a couple of brahmacharis. They were going to save us from these dogs. And up went Prabhupada. He says, no, stop. And he took his chapati and he tore it in half, and he gave one to one dog, one to the other, and then he goes, hut, Jow. And they just walked away. And then he turned and said, you never know who they are, these dogs in Vrindavan. And it's really intense, because we had this sudden glimpse at the fact that we were in the holy Dham, and we were seeing dogs, but actually Prabhupada was seeing spirit souls, and we didn't know who they were. And Prabhupada didn't discriminate. He didn't play with dogs. He didn't have them in his house, but he didn't kick them either. He didn't mistreat any living being.
But I wanted to tell you a story about when I was in Vrindavan in 1975, 76. I was so happy I was there in that time period. It was a difficult time right then for everyone really. But I was really happy because I was in Vrindavan, and it was such a goal for me to go to India, because the first group of devotees that went, I was just so disappointed, And but I'm like, okay, okay. And then it was 1974, I think, or 75, and then Prabhupada was in LA, and that's when we went. Stoka Krishna went to Srila Prabhupada and said, we want to go to India, and Prabhupada said, go to Vrindavan. So we went, and Stoka Krishna ended up being, helping a lot with the temple management there, and doing a lot of wonderful service. And anyhow, I was just very grateful to be there. But it was very difficult sometimes to have any personal contact with Srila Prabhupada. It was like there was it's by that time he had his army around him or something of captains and generals and all that, So and especially for me, because I was a mom. I had 2 little children, and so in India with 2 babies, you know, it was pretty time. It's like I had to take care of things, and milk even, just to keep milk and all of those things. So, and I was used to doing a lot of service. I did Sankirtan, I did puppet shows, I did so many things in Los Angeles. So when I was there in Vrindavan, it was different. You know, I was taking care of the babies, and you couldn't even go on the altar. You couldn't go in the kitchen. You know, it was very different for me. But, like I said, I was so happy to be there, and I did parikrams and so many things that I had the time to do. And Srila Prabhupada was there, and like I say, I would go by his door and I'd see there's just no way to get in there. You know, you just forget it, you know. And so I'd go to the temple room and stuff, and we did hear lectures every day, so that was awesome. And then there was this one evening, and I was walking from Sundar Arti, and I'm walking from the temple room up in Srila Prabhupada's quarters right there, and where the guest house was at that time, where now the restaurant is. So I was walking that way, and I look into Prabhupada's quarters, and there's nobody there, and Srila Prabhupada's there, but nobody at the door, nobody there. And I'm like, this is my chance. This is it, you know. I'm very glad I'm like that, actually. But anyhow, I looked, and I went, oh my gosh, I'm going in there now. And so I went up, and I walked in the door, and there was only one brahmachari who was leaned up against the wall, and he was kind of covered in his chadar, and he was chanting japa. And I'm going, wow, this is so quiet. And Srila Prabhupada was just up there at his desk, and he was reading, and just there at his desk, he had his leg up, one leg up, and he was just sitting and reading and doing different things. And so I sat down in the middle of the room and just started chanting. There's a pre-story to this, because I was in Mayapur and I just was rejected by one of the important people there. Some kind of confusion that I won't get into. But I felt rejected, okay, just so you know. And I felt like there's just no way I could ever please Srila Prabhupada, because I'm a woman and because I have children. And I really believed that at that time, you know, that's how I was feeling, okay? And wherever any of that, okay, and we know the history of everything, so, you know. So anyhow, so I was like, okay, I felt kind of hopeless. And there I was sitting there in the room with Srila Prabhupada, and I felt that feeling. And I thought, this is the time that I can talk with Prabhupada about that. Because I don't want him, because what I had heard is that this one devotee had told me that he told Prabhupada that I was lazy. And so I was really brokenhearted, you know, that I would think that Prabhupada would think I was lazy. Not that I'm not lazy, because now I know I am. But then I didn't feel like I was lazy. And I was really angry and also felt hopeless, because there was just no way, you know, that I was going to please Prabhupada or do anything right, you know, at that point. So anyhow, Srila Prabhupada was there, and I went up to his desk. I had the courage. I mustered it up. And I said to Srila Prabhupada, I just folded my hands, and Prabhupada came up and smiled. And so I knew I could speak. And I said, Srila Prabhupada, and I got out a few words, and then I just started crying completely, like, whoa! I mean, it was deep crying, like I should have been in therapy or something, you know. But Prabhupada sat there, and I was crying, Prabhupada, I'm a woman. There's no way I can please you. I'm a woman, and I have children, and they say I'm lazy now. And Srila Prabhupada, at that point, when he heard that, then I saw his arm go back, and he did this smile. It was like the universe or something. And when he did that smile, I just, oh my gosh, you know, how could he think that was a smile thing, you know? Because I was so sad. But that smile was like, he embraced me, you know, with that smile. And then he said to me, he came close and he goes, are you reading my books? That's what he said to me. Are you reading my books? And I was reading his books, because that's one thing that moms can do, okay? And when you're breastfeeding, everything is you could read books, okay? So I was reading, I was all the way up to the book that he was finished with, you know, and at that time it was probably like 7th canto, 6th canto or something, 5th canto, I don't even know. But it wasn't very much. But the thing was I read them. And so I said to Prabhupada, yes, Srila Prabhupada, I am reading your books. And he said, then you are pleasing me. Yeah. And I mean, you could imagine, and I just was so grateful, and I just felt so much love. That's why I say the unconditional love changed my life.
Another time, Prabhupada was sitting in the courtyard of the Radha Damodar temple near the Samadhi of Rupa Goswami. And this Brijbasi couple, this was in the morning after a Nectar of Devotion lecture, they came there. There were some villagers, simple Brijbasi folks, very devoted, very, very simple, very, very attracted to Prabhupada. And we sat there, and Prabhupada had this incredible exchange with them in Hindi, and we were thinking, who are these people? I mean, we were thinking they were not even initiated, they're not even devotees, they're not even in ISKCON, they're not this and they're not that. But Prabhupada spent over an hour talking to these people and laughing, and it was like he was experiencing increasing ecstasy over the course of this hour. And we could not understand Hindi. We could not understand what they were saying. And Prabhupada was laughing and talking about Krishna. You could hear about Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj and the Gopas and the Gopis and the Yamuna and this and that. And then Prabhupada was just like amazingly in total bliss. And later on I found out from another devotee, Prabhupada said that some of these people are actually liberated souls. They're very, very exalted transcendentalists, although they may look like ordinary farmers or some village people. So this was one way of Prabhupada telling us to be very respectful of the inhabitants of the Dham.
On that day, I made very Bengali food and served it in a Bengali fashion, arranged on the thali in a Bengali order. And Srila Prabhupada's sleeping room is where he respected. And so he sat behind his desk, and Pishima, we gave a small chunky. She sat just directly opposite Srila Prabhupada on the floor. So as soon as I brought the thalis in and sat them down, Srila Prabhupada started making these little comical remarks about his sister. And he said, you know, she says it is water, I say it is fat. And I thought, my goodness, he's talking about her weight. You know, what's going on? And she, as soon as Prabhupada started kind of being light in his voice, Pishima kind of started chuckling. You know, she started kind of laughing on the side. And he said, all this. And he went like this. He was flapping his arm back. He said, this is fat, he said. But she calls it water. It's not so. And then he started teasing her. He started telling her about, oh goodness, the days when in their childhood they used to fly kites. And he said, I always used to beat her at kites, he said. And back and forth, he was speaking very brother-sisterly about his little sister. So she was laughing, not understanding a word of all this. And in the course of all this kind of jesting, I was bringing the chapatis in, relays of chapatis. And when Srila Prabhupada finished his meal, I noticed that every katori, the little round bowls that all of the moist preparations that are in and serving a thali, they were now piled one on top of the other, from the largest to the smallest, nearly 12 inches high, on top of his chunky. And when I walked in the room, he took his finger like this and he knocked down the whole stack. And he said, Yamuna Mai ki jai. And I said, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. And Pishima said, Gauranitai ki jai. And I said, oh, Srila Prabhupada, you ate everything. He said, now this was a speech that the two of us had with each other. Srila Prabhupada and I had signals for what the quality of the prasad was. Already now things had evolved much from the very early days. And if he patted his stomach, that meant it was third class. If he went like this, second class. If he went like this, first class. This meant excellent. So he said like that, excellent. And in this way, I remember very light, sweet, jovial, humorous. First meeting with Bishie Ma, where she didn't understand a word of what was going on, but she truly loved it. She was very, very fond of Srila Prabhupada, and from that day that I met her until very last that she was with Srila Prabhupada in 1976, I was also present in Vrindavan. She worshipped him. She just worshipped her brother, and he obviously was very, very fond of her.
During the Nectar of Devotion series in Vrindavan 1972, when Prabhupada gave the Nectar of Devotion series for 1 month, there was one doubt that was plaguing me because we were putting so much effort into book distribution. But I'd always been taught when I was first joining that the parampara is like a link, a chain. And if you don't have the perfect link, if you're not initiated, you really can't go back to God. And so I had this doubt that we're distributing so many books, but these people will read them, but if they're not initiated, they can't go back to God. So I followed Prabhupada from back Rupa Goswami's Samadhi back into the courtyard. And just before Prabhupada took the steps up onto his courtyard, I presented this question to Prabhupada. I said, we're distributing so many books, but if people aren't initiated, then they can't go back to Godhead. And Prabhupada turned and looked at me right in the eyes. And he said, just by reading my books, they're initiated. And I thought that, another example of compassion.
Like Shayananda Maharaj was in the room with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was discussing various plans, preaching plans. And then he said, so what should we do? And Akshayananda Maharaj replied, Prabhupada, we'll just have to become Krishna conscious. And Prabhupada said, another impractical suggestion. That story kind of made the rounds in Vrindavan at the time, and I just always thought that was one of the most hilarious. Oh, and you know that these are just story. For instance, that story that the devotee was saying, "Oh, he was the most fallen." You know this one? I'm the most fallen, Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, "You're not the most anything." Okay. That's it. I mean, this devotee was lamenting, like trying to show how humble he was, and he said, "Prabhupada, I'm the most fallen." And Prabhupada said, "You're not the most anything." You know, it's kind of like wanting credit for being the most something. And Prabhupada said, "You're not the most anything." That always struck me. But that's what I mean. It was so quick, and it was so funny. It was so sharp and very sarcastic. But you never felt offended when he did it. Even if it was at your expense, it was funny. You know, you had to admit it was really funny. And it always had an instructive edge to it. I think that was the other part that was so nice, that it was merciful. You know, because he was trying to help you. The false ego is such an obstacle, and he was trying to cut through that and make us try to get more in touch with reality.
After the parikrama, in the morning every day, devotees would take prasad, and then Srila Prabhupada would have darshan in his room and meet his old friends from Vrindavan, his godbrothers, and so many others. And I used to just sit there all afternoon with him and just watch him talking with his old Brijbasi friends. And there was a rule that devotees were not supposed to be there, because in the afternoon the devotees were supposed to do seva, doing Harinam Sankirtan and other services. So I would sit there, and one day the regional manager of ISKCON for India at the time, he saw me sitting there with Srila Prabhupada. And at that time it was just Prabhupada and myself in the room. And he said to me that no devotees are allowed to sit with Prabhupada during his darshan time. And I looked at Prabhupada, and Prabhupada looked at me, and then I said to this devotee, I said, "But I'm not a devotee." Then I pointed to my matted hair. And then he looked at Prabhupada, and Prabhupada smiled. And then he left, and I got to stay with Prabhupada. And I remember it was so beautiful seeing Prabhupada meet his old friends, especially Krishnadas Babaji. That was a beautiful sight. Krishnadas Babaji came to see Prabhupada. I remember actually, I met him on the street and I told him that Prabhupada was here. So he said, take me. So I brought him. And while I was trying to bring him up the stairs to Prabhupada's room, one sannyasi disciple told him he wasn't allowed to come. He was actually ready to physically throw him out. I said, please ask Prabhupada if he wants to see him. And he went up and asked, and then he said, yes, he wants to see you. So he came into the room. And when Srila Prabhupada met him, Prabhupada was talking to a whole group of about 15 people. When Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj came into the room, Prabhupada's eyes just became filled with tears. And Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj's eyes became full of tears. And Prabhupada stood up. And Babaji Maharaj called out, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And Prabhupada practically ran to him and embraced him. And as they were embracing, they were just so affectionate. I had never seen in my entire life such affectionate and love between two people as Prabhupada was embracing his godbrother. And then Prabhupada took him with his arms around him to the seat where he would sit behind a little table. And they were both sitting together on this seat. And they had their arms around each other, and they were talking in Bengali. And as they were talking, I couldn't understand, but Prabhupada was laughing so hard. Krishnadas Babaji kept saying these things, and Prabhupada was just laughing and laughing and laughing. And every now and then they would slap each other on the legs. They were practically sitting on top of each other. And there was tears in their eyes. They were just so happy to be together, discussing transcendental subject matters. And it was amazing because all these people in the room, Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada, were completely oblivious to everyone. They were just in their own world, hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord together.
They were doing a fire jagga in, I think it was Vrindavan temple or something, some temple, the Srila Prabhupada. The temple had already been established, but they were doing a fire jagga. And one of these, I think it was one of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers, it was in the middle of the fire jagga, and he leaned over to Prabhupada and he said, Srila Prabhupada, they're doing it all wrong, they're doing it all wrong. And Prabhupada leaned back and he looked at him very calmly and he said, that's all right, they're just practicing.
One time in Vrindavan, he asked me what they're saying, and I said, Prabhupada, they're saying that we are parasites, that we're simply leeching off the society. And in this way, carrying on, but we're not contributing anything. And then he said, so? Stop giving. And then everyone was silent. He said, but you can't. And that's all he said, but it was very profound, and I appreciated the point that it's that you say we're only parasites, then we say then stop giving. But someone else is supplying us. This Sankirtan movement is going on not because you're supporting us. You're benefiting by participating. The support is coming from above. Krishna's in the background. He's supplying. He's supporting.
There was a room full of Indians, visitors, in Vrindavan. And Kundali was there fanning Prabhupada with chamara. All of a sudden the door burst open and it was Vishal and Vishalini carrying these platters of Simply Wonderfuls. And at the top of his voice, he announces as he bursts into the door, Simply Wonderfuls for a Simply Wonderful spiritual master. So Prabhupada started grinning because he was often highly entertained by Vishal. So he was grinning away, and then Vishal and his wife, they went around distributing Simply Wonderfuls to everybody in the room. Then Vishal took one of Prabhupada's books off of, there's bookshelves all around the room, and he took one of the books off the shelves, opened it up, and began to glorify Prabhupada and all of his books and his writing, and what a fantastic personality Prabhupada was. And then he went around and distributed books to the people in the room and got donations. And Kundali was describing that his mind was completely blown by all of this because he'd never seen anybody act like this around Prabhupada. So then he finished up his little preaching, and book distribution excursion. Prabhupada the whole time was just smiling and nodding his head. And then Vishal said to Prabhupada on his way out, he said, "Prabhupada, just one thing." Yes? He said, "I haven't got 7.3 yet." Srimad Bhagavatam, 7. "I haven't got 7.3 yet. Can I borrow yours?" Prabhupada said, "Take it." So that was one about Vishal. Another time, Vishal used to, whenever Prabhupada used to circumambulate the temple in the morning in Vrindavan, Vishal would be standing with his hands folded, chanting all these prayers from the Bhagavatam. We think that you're good, and giving the English translations. Well, on this particular morning, there was all this water because it had rained, and it was just, sheeting on the temple step area. And Prabhupada just snapped at Vishal. He said, "Do something practical." He said, "Clean this up." So that was his response to the glorification. He ordered him to do some cleaning.
So I have to understand that when the temple opened, we were still very young, and there was like 5-6 people in charge of the temple, Gunanava, Sorabi, Akshayananda, Dhananjaya Prabhu, Gunanava as well, because all of a sudden, this is the first big temple Prabhupada had opened, and we're in Vrindavan, in the midst of all the smarta Brahmana and everything, so we had to do everything just so. So Prabhupada wanted us to represent him, and so they could not find fault with us and accept us, So at that time, Srila Prabhupada found out that that Balaram's plow was stolen, and it was the second time, and it was made of like silver. So Prabhupada asked at the time the head pujari, and the head pujari said, "Well, it was somehow." Anyway, he basically said they were badmas, rascal, whoever took it, and they're really gonna, suffer for stealing Krishna Singh. And Prabhupada said, "Yes, but you will have to suffer half the consequences because it was under his watch, and it was his responsibility. He accepted that responsibility to that service, and by not doing it the way it should have been done, enabled him to steal a thing." So that was a pretty heavy lesson, that we have to take responsibilities.
I have another kirtan instance where I was leading. Prabhupada it was again in Vrindavan. Prabhupada was to lecture in Hindi. He had some Indian dignitaries coming, and there was a group. There weren't a lot of devotees around. There were some devotees because Prabhupada's entire lecture was going to be in Hindi. That was announced. Anyway, they wanted kirtan to be sung while Prabhupada was entering. So I was leading kirtan, and again, kirtan is not something that you get mental about. Kirtan comes from the heart. There's an old Sufi saying that which comes from the lips does not go past the ears. That which comes from the heart goes to the heart. So kirtan is meant not to be mental, but I was mental about it. I was also very tired, and also trying to get used to Vrindavan and everything. So I was tired and not really focused. So I was chanting Hare Krishna, and I was thinking to myself, am I chanting good? Am I not chanting? What's going on here with the game? I was just getting really mental. But I was leading, and I was playing mridanga, because I usually played mridanga in those days. Prior to arthritis, I used to play mridanga a lot. And then Prabhupada walked in, and the kirtan was going, and Prabhupada just looked right at me, and he went, like an orchestra leader, he just went, put some gusto into it. And then I saw Prabhupada with those hand motions, and then all of a sudden, totally off the mental platform, and just went into kind of a rip-roaring kirtan, renewed energy, renewed strength, and there was no mental interference.
It was the full moon night in the Sarat season. It was I believe that's called the Rasa Purnima. So Krishna performs this Ras Leela with the gopis. So Panchadevita Maharaj came in and said, Srila Prabhupada, you want to hear the chapters of the Ras Leela? And Prabhupada said, yes, that would be nice. So Maharaj is reading and reading and reading, and everyone's like listening, and I'm looking at Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada had his eyes closed, and then I started wondering, is he listening, or is maybe he dozed off, or and after about 2 hours, you know how in the Krishna book Prabhupada will quote different shlokas. So he made a quote, and Maharaj was reading the Sanskrit as like Priyamanani, right? And he said something Priyamanani or something, whatever. He mispronounced the word, and immediately Prabhupada went Priyamanani, and then he went back and closed his eyes. So it was like, and again, all the hairs on my body stood on end, because Prabhupada was in rapt attention. He was in samadhi. He was just absorbed in hearing the pastimes of Krishna from his own Krishna book. And so at the end, Maharaj said, Prabhupada, maybe we can do this every night. He said, yes. We're simply here to enjoy.
Krishna Kirtana Ganana Tanapano
Jai Anilo Premadana Karuna Prachu Jai Anilo